Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, a market that might sound incredibly niche at first,
Right.
global nuclear valves.
Uh-huh.
But our source material, it's a market outlook report powered by cognitive market research. And it presents some absolutely striking figures, things that suggest this niche is set for truly massive growth.
It really does. Yeah. Our mission here is basically to cut through the data, pull out the key revenue numbers, the growth trends, across different regions,
Right.
and just understand the trajectory of this specific market. And we're basing this only on what this report is telling us.
Yeah, because you might not think about, the valves inside a nuclear plant very often.
Probably not.
But these projections, wow, they
I
seem like pretty significant indicators.
They really are. Significant feels like maybe an understatement once you see the scale.
Okay, so the report projects tremendous expansion over the next
Mhm.
decade, right?
Right. Exactly. And just for context for you listening, these aren't just any valves, they're critical. Safety, control, isolating systems within nuclear power plants, related facilities.
Super important stuff.
Absolutely. So understanding their market health, it kind of gives us a peek into the health and, well, future investment in nuclear energy itself.
Makes sense. So let's start with a big picture then, the global outlook presented in the source.
All right. So looking at the global figures provided, the report states the market was valued at roughly $5.2 billion. That was back in 2021.
Okay, 5.2 billion.
Then by 2025, it had already risen to about $8.3 billion.
Okay, decent jump. But here's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
The projection for 2033.
Yeah, this is the big one. It doesn't just grow. It skyrockets. The projection is over $21 billion.
$21 billion, wow.
Exactly. That represents a pretty impressive compound annual growth rate, this IGR, of 12.3% over that period.
Okay, a 12.3% CAGR. I mean, for a specialized industrial part like this, that feels like a really strong signal. Suggests major activity, major expansion in, the nuclear industry it serves.
Definitely. That kind of number tells us something substantial is happening, or at least projected to happen, in the broader energy landscape that needs this specific component on a massive scale.
Right. Okay, so let's dive into the regions then. The report details quite a few. Starting with North America, it seems like a major player right now.
North America indeed shows substantial figures in this report. The total revenue for the region listed as roughly $2.4 billion in 2021,
Okay.
climbing to about $3.7 billion in 2025, and it's expected to reach over $9.1 billion by 2033.
9.1 billion. So yeah, more than tripling over that forecast period.
Impressive.
It is. And within North America, the United States is, well, clearly leading the charge according to this data.
Absolutely. The report shows the U.S. market was about $1.9 billion in 2021.
Almost 2 billion just there.
Yeah, growing to around $3 billion in 2025 and projected to hit over $7.2 billion by 2033.
7.2 billion for the US alone. Okay. What about Canada and Mexico?
Canada also contributes significantly, moving from roughly $274 million in 2021 to around $441 million in 2025, with an anticipation of reaching over $1.1 billion in 2033.
Over $1 billion for Canada too.
And Mexico showed solid growth as well, going from about $180 million in 2021 to around $284 million in 2025, forecasted at over $707 million by 2033.
So strong, pretty consistent growth across the board in North America based on this report.
That's what the data suggests, yeah.
Okay, let's shift across the Atlantic, Europe.
Yeah.
What do the numbers tell us about the nuclear valve market there?
So Europe's total revenue is stated at about $900 million in 2021.
Okay, starting smaller than North America.
Yes, but rising to roughly $1.4 billion in 2025 and expected to reach around $3.4 billion by 2033.
3.4 billion. So similar pattern to North America, a significant projected increase, almost quadrupling from 2021.
Exactly, nearly quadrupling. That's a good way to put it.
And the source breaks down several key countries in Europe too, right?
It does. For example, the UK was about $106 million in 2021, projected to reach over $416 million by 2033.
Okay.
Germany showed strong growth from about $181 million to over $727 million in that same period.
Germany over 700 million.
Right. France is noted at roughly $116 million in 2021, forecasting over $406 million by 2033. Italy climbed from about $84 million to over $301 million. Russia grew steadily from roughly $56 million to over $181 million. Spain showed, solid upward growth, about $90 million to over $347 million by 2033.
And the report also mentions others, like Denmark, Switzerland.
Yes, Denmark, Switzerland, Luxembourg are mentioned.
Yep.
And the rest of Europe sort of lumped together, collectively climbing from about $122 million in 2021 to over $461 million by 2033.
So really widespread growth across the continent, according to this data.
It appears so. Now, here's a region the source specifically highlights. Calls it a standout in terms of dynamism, Asia-Pacific.
Ah, yes. I see why looking at these figures. The numbers here are incredibly impressive.
They really are.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
The numbers here are incredibly impressive.
They really are.
Asia-Pacific surged from just over $1 billion in 2021
Right.
to roughly $1.8 billion in 2025, projected to reach a substantial $4.9 billion by 2033.
Almost $5 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this region is clearly poised for rapid expansion in this market, based on the report.
Who's leading the way there? China, I assume.
China definitely leads within APAC. Figures of about $356 million in 2021, growing to roughly $594 million in 2025, and projected at over $1.6 billion by 2033.
$1.6 billion for China.
Okay.
Japan?
Japan advanced from roughly $147 million to about $237 million, expected to hit over $613 million by 2033.
Still significant growth. And India.
Ah.
The report seemed quite bullish on India.
Yes, it specifically notes that India is booming, leaping from about $105 million in 2021 to roughly $182 million in 2025.
Okay.
Expected to reach over $547 million by 2033.
Wow, over $500 million. That kind of growth rate is exceptional. Definitely seems to align with India's stated energy ambitions,
It does seem to fit that narrative. South Korea also shows, quote, healthy growth in the report. Roughly $103 million in 2021, moving to over $439 million by 2033.
Healthy indeed.
And the source also mentions Australia, Singapore, Southeast Asia, Taiwan, and the rest of APAC. All contributed robust numbers, each showing double-digit CAGRs according to the data.
So it's not just a China and India story in APAC. It seems pretty widespread across the region.
That's the picture the report paints, yes. Widespread, strong growth.
Okay. Moving on, let's look at South America. What's the picture for nuclear valves there, based on this report?
So in South America, the market reached about $377 million in 2021.
Okay.
Roughly $606 million in 2025. And it's estimated at over $1.5 billion by 2033.
Over $1.5 billion. So another region projecting pretty significant expansion.
Yes, definitely upward trajectory. Brazil alone accounted for roughly $158 million back in 2021, rising significantly to over $646 million projected by 2033.
$646 million for Brazil.
Okay.
Argentina.
Argentina showed a notable CAGR, that's the term used in the report, moving from about $68 million in 2021 to over $299 million by 2033.
Almost $300 million? Notable indeed.
And the source also notes that Colombia, Peru, and Chile posted strong growth figures. The rest of South America contributed about $48 million in 2021, climbing to over $199 million by 2033.
So maybe starting from a smaller base than, say, North America or Asia Pacific.
Correct.
But the growth trajectory is clearly upward there, too.
Very much so, according to these numbers.
Okay, next up, the Middle East, a region we often hear about for major energy projects, obviously.
Yeah.
How does the nuclear valve market look there?
Yes, the Middle East region recorded about $267 million in 2021.
Right.
Roughly $428 million in 2025. And it's anticipated to grow to over $1 billion by 2033, so crossing that billion-dollar mark.
$1 billion by 2033. Key players. Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia, yes. It moved from about $79 million to over $327 million in the forecast period.
Okay, significant jump for Saudi.
And the report specifically highlights the UAE, expected to reach over $188 million by 2033, from just over $42 million in 2021.
Wow, okay, that's very rapid growth projected for the UAE market specifically.
It is. And Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, and the rest of the Middle East are also noted as showing substantial growth, according to the source.
Interesting. Okay, finally, let's look at Africa.
Africa, okay. The African market surged from about $246 million in 2021 to roughly $406 million in 2025, and is forecasted to reach, again, just over $1 billion in 2033, also crossing that billion-dollar threshold.
So Africa and the Middle East both projected to hit around $1 billion by 2033 in this specific market.
That's what the report suggests, yes.
Yeah.
According to the source, Nigeria and South Africa are highlighted as top contributors in Africa.
Okay.
Nigeria is shown growing from roughly $39 million to over $164 million by 2033, and South Africa from about $80 million to over $352 million.
South Africa leading there then.
In terms of volume, yes. And the rest of Africa also showed consistent growth, ending the period at over $486 million by 2033.
Okay. So if we try to sort of synthesize all this data from the report,
Yeah.
just stepping back for a second,
Yeah.
rounding the figures maybe helps grasp it.
Yeah,
The most striking thing has to be that projected global growth, right?
absolutely.
From around $5.2 billion in 2021. The report anticipates this market will more than quadruple to over $21 billion by 2033.
It truly is a dramatic projected increase. It really stands out.
And while, North America holds the largest share in absolute dollars right now,
Mm-hmm.
Asia-Pacific is clearly identified in the report as a standout region. Tremendous growth potential, particularly, fueled by countries like China and India, according to this data.
Exactly. But we also see substantial growth projected pretty much everywhere else. Europe, South America, the Middle East, Africa.
Yeah, it's not confined to just one or two spots. The report indicates it's a globally distributed trend.
That's the clear message from these figures.
Okay, so based purely on the numbers and the descriptions provided in this cognitive market research report, this deep dive into the global nuclear valves market outlook reveals, a market projected for truly explosive growth over the next decade.
Explosive feels like the right word, yeah. Reaching over $21 billion globally.
And the report highlights this significant growth across continents. Regions like North America and Asia-Pacific leading in scale or, sheer growth rate.
Right.
And key countries like the U.S., China, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, South Africa.
Yeah.
All showing particularly strong trajectories according to this source.
Which naturally leads to a final thought, doesn't it? This level of projected growth in such a specific, critical component market, it raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. And this is based only on the data presented in this report.
Right, just the data.
What could the specific, significant, and really widespread growth in the market for nuclear components suggest about broader global energy infrastructure trends, about investment priorities, as we look out towards 2033?
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into a really critical piece of the global energy puzzle, the nuclear valves market.
Yeah, it's often overlooked, isn't it?
It really is. And our deep dive is based on some analysis from cognitive market research.
That's right. And our mission really is to quickly boil down what's truly important here. The core forces driving things, the big hurdles, and maybe some surprising trends shaping its future.
So we can help you cut straight to what matters.
Exactly.
And, right off the bat, you see this strong forward momentum. It seems deeply tied to that global push for cleaner energy sources, right?
Absolutely. And countries looking to expand their nuclear capacity, it feels less like some niche market and more like a fundamental...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Less like some niche market and more like a fundamental piece enabling that bigger energy transition.
What's really striking, I think, is just how demanding this market is. It's not about churning things out.
No, definitely not mass production. It's all about extreme precision under really, really challenging conditions. We're talking about meeting incredibly strict standards, operational, safety.
Like ASME or RCCM in Europe.
Precisely. And these aren't just, guidelines. They're absolute mandates. These valves have to be engineered to handle intense pressure, high temperatures, radiation.
Wow.
So that strict demand for these specialized high-integrity parts, that's a primary driver right there.
And it's not only about the shiny new reactors either, is it? Keeping the current ones running safely seems like a huge part of the picture.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the existing plants, the Gen 3, Gen 3 types built decades back, they need constant life cycle management.
Meaning upgrades and replacements?
Yeah, regular checks, maintenance, and often replacing these very specialized nuclear-grade valves. It's crucial for safety and efficiency over their, very long operational lives.
And then looking ahead, there's all the buzz around the next generation, like small modular reactors, SMRs.
Right. They might be smaller, sure, but they still need components they can absolutely rely on, no question.
Does that create new demands then?
Yeah.
Different kinds of valves.
It does raise an important point. SMRs often need innovative, high-performance valve designs, specifically tailored for more compact systems. Reliability needs might be even higher, operating parameters potentially different.
Mm-hmm.
So that adds a whole distinct layer of demand for, well, specialized components.
Okay, so clear drivers pushing things forward, energy needs, safety standards, new tech like SMRs. But what about the friction? What are the big restraints holding things back?
Well, if you think about the nature of nuclear, the constraints often tie directly back to those really high safety stakes. The certification process, maybe that's the biggest one.
How so?
It's just notoriously expensive and incredibly time-consuming. It can often take years, literally years.
Years to certify a valve.
Yeah. Every design, sometimes even individual units, need extensive testing, rigorous regulatory approval. It creates this massive barrier to entry and, frankly, slows everything down.
That sounds like a huge challenge. Does that limit who can even operate in this space?
Exactly. Procurement itself is also really complex. You're talking multi-year bidding, layers of strict quality control,
Right.
which leads straight to another restraint. There's just a limited number of qualified manufacturers worldwide. Very few companies have the decades of experience, the specialized facilities, the capital,
The deep pockets needed.
precisely, to meet these requirements consistently. So naturally, that limits competition.
And I guess, like with anything nuclear, you can't ignore the wider public and political feelings.
Exactly. Opposition in some places can stall or even stop new projects completely.
Which directly cuts demand for the valves that would have gone into those plants.
Yep. Straightforward impact.
Okay, so a real push-pull. You got powerful forces like clean energy goals and SMRs driving growth, but countered by these intense hurdles, certification, tricky supply chains, few manufacturers. What about the future? What trends are actually shaping how these valves are made and used?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. We're seeing some genuinely transformative shifts, like the move towards smart valve technologies.
Meaning, they're not just mechanical anymore.
Right. They're not just passive parts. They're getting sensors, diagnostics built in for real-time performance monitoring, predictive maintenance, even remote operation.
So they become active players in how the plant runs.
Exactly. They feed into the plant's operational intelligence. And there's also significant work happening in advanced materials and coatings.
To handle the harsh environment better.
Precisely. Using materials specifically designed for nuclear settings improves resistance to radiation, corrosion, extreme temperatures. It extends lifespan and boosts reliability significantly.
And thinking about global supply chains, especially for critical stuff like this,
Yeah,
that's a big concern everywhere now.
it really is. So localization is becoming a key trend. Countries increasingly want to build up their own domestic manufacturing capabilities for nuclear parts, like valves.
To secure their supply, reduce geopolitical risks.
And ensure energy independence, yeah. And also, tying back to those existing plants we mentioned, the need for renovation and upgrades is driving development too.
Custom solutions.
Kind of. Customized valve solutions designed to fit seamlessly into older systems, but still meet today's tougher performance and safety standards.
So, wrapping this up, you've got this essential market critical for nuclear power. It's being pushed forward by global clean energy goals and exciting new tech like SMRs.
But at the same time, it's really constrained by the huge costs and time involved in certification, complex procurement, a small supplier pool, and sometimes public pushback.
And yet, you have these really interesting trends. Smart tech, better materials, localization, reshaping the components themselves.
It's a fascinating mix, isn't it? High technology, super strict regulation, and global energy strategy all intersecting.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. As the world tries to balance growing energy needs with non-negotiable safety demands and, frankly, a shifting geopolitical map, how will these complex dynamics within markets for essential components like nuclear valves ultimately shape the future of our energy infrastructure itself?
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.